Hello and welcome to the Total Saints podcast. We are the weekly Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. This podcast is being live streamed on YouTube, Facebook, X and on Twitch. So good evening if you're watching live and happy Mother's Day. Our podcast is supported by our loyal Patreon community. Without you, we couldn't make this show each week. So thank you as always for your support. Coming up on the podcast, a large fire next to St Mary's Stadium meant the Preston game was called off. We'll look at when it might get played and what the implications are. Saturday's game did go ahead, another 7-goal thriller. We'll look back at victory over Sunderland. And the financial accounts were released this week, made for some grim reading. So try and stay awake for that bit a little later on. My name is Martin Starke, and joining me this evening are Steve Grant, the owner of SaintsWeb, Glen, Cour, writer of the blog League 1-10, and Alfie House's senior Southampton reporter for the Daily Echo. All underpinned by our TSP patrons. This is episode 269 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, we start, as always, with a shout out for our Patreon community because their monthly contributions support the show. There are 4 tiers ranging from £5 to £20 per month. And aside from supporting the podcast, each of those tiers has perks like access to an ad-free version of the podcast. There's exclusive TSP t-shirts, the TSP FPL. You get access to the events that we're putting on and much more as well. And if you're in one of our top tiers, you should now have received an invite to the virtual meetup, which we've scheduled for the end of this month. Look forward to seeing you there. Don't forget, we've recently launched the new look TSP shop as well. If you're a patron, you get a discount, and we're adding lines all the time. There's a great selection of hoodies, t-shirts and mugs. There's coasters, beanie hats and loads more as well. Go and check that out. The address is shop.totalsaints.co.uk. And if you want to get involved in supporting TSP each month, just head over to patreon.com/Total Saints podcast for more details. All the links are in the podcast show notes, and you'll find them in the YouTube description as well. Now, we had planned to bring you a podcast on Thursday, but of course the midweek game was called off. A huge fire broke out on Wednesday lunchtime, destroying several buildings in Marine Parade, which is the industrial estate adjacent to the stadium. Huge smoke plumes billowed out across St Mary's, so it was no surprise really that the Preston North End game was called off at about 4 o'clock. Alfie, a busy afternoon, I guess, for the newsroom in particular.
Yeah, it's one of those where I'm quite grateful for. They just take care of that and try and, unfortunately squeeze that for as much as possible. But it was, looking at damage now and walking past on Saturday, I can't really believe that for a second any of us ever thought the game might actually be on. I suppose you just think that the emergency services will come in and they'll sort it out and you'll be in by 8 o'clock. But, huge devastation to that particular area. So it means it's going to be, 10 games in 36 days to finish the season. It's going to be a busy schedule. But I did enjoy the stadium DJ's take on it with a couple of fire-related songs, and I think it may have been somebody, it may have been Steve, maybe someone else, but they commented that, if you're the owner of that property, sat there in the stands, and everyone's sort of laughing about the fact that it's all burned down, you'd sort of be hiding your tears a little bit. But thankfully, nobody was hurt. That's the most important thing, and that's why
I'm sure it's insured. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it did feel as soon as you knew nobody was hurt and everybody was okay, it was kind of then fair game. All the jokes started online, didn't they? So, Glenn, I mean, you and I sit down that end, and it was still looking pretty ropey yesterday, wasn't it? The fire service was still there just before kickoff. I think they were just packing up and leaving, but you can see why the game didn't go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, I walked down sort of from the Itching Bridge past the Chapel Arms, and there's you kind of see the front of the industrial unit first, and they were still spraying water on that, so it was still sizzling a little bit, or smouldering, whatever the word is. And then you walk, but the front of the building, obviously you could tell there'd been a fire inside, but the front of the building was more or less intact. And then you got around the side as you walked further on towards the ground, and the whole thing had completely fallen down. But it wasn't until you turn the corner into the ground itself and you see where the fan zone is and the chapel stand. So, and then sort of look to your left and you realise exactly how close it is to the ground. I did see someone had obviously stood roughly where I was at that particular point and filmed the smoke, sort of, or the ash or whatever it was, sort of coming out of the fire and going over the top of the stadium. So yeah, like Alfie says, there was absolutely no way that that game was going to go ahead from the moment the fire started. Really, I don't really know why they took so long to call it off, but there you go. I mean, and I was walking my dog at 6 o'clock in Botley, and I could see you could see the the plume of smoke and stuff over town. It's about 6 miles away. So far-reaching.
It did feel, Steve.
Sorry, Mike. We should definitely reference the Preston fans, by the way.
And going to
the
the
Preston fans that have come down, but apparently,
game.
not that. I was thinking more unlucky lads. Their bus obviously got down halfway down. They turned around and their suspension on the coach broke, and they were stuck on the motorway for another however many hours. So that really is the away day from hell.
There was a few that went to the Tottenham game, though, wasn't there? I know that you were reporting on that. Did they sort of open up the gates and said, if you've got a ticket, you can come on down?
Yeah, it's genius from Tottenham, isn't it? I think it was a Southampton Cup quarter-final against
It was just the Southampton Senior Cup, so it's nothing. They wouldn't have been charging a huge entry fee for that anyway. I wouldn't have thought so. Yeah, good, clever bit of PR from them. Handy, they were basically the only game on that night as well, because Scholing I think played the following night. So yeah, good sort of quick work from their marketing people.
And Steve, were you surprised it took them so long to call it off? Because when I saw the pictures that started to come through, originally you think, well, they're just going to put that out and it'll be okay. And then you start to see some of the other videos, and then you see the pictures from, as Glen says, like from Botley and Hedge End, and you can see it from almost driving in from Salisbury. You think, actually, no, this is maybe a bit worse than we thought.
Yeah, it was a bit frustrating. I mean, purely from a selfish perspective, I'd have liked to have known at 2:30 that it was going to be called off, and I could have just got back on the road and gone home. But yeah, rather than I ended up having to wait until about 7 o'clock or so, let the rush hour traffic die down and get back on the M3. But yeah, I guess there are certain procedures that they have to follow, and it's obviously quite a big deal to postpone a sort of big public event where you've got 30-odd thousand people come into it from all kind of quarters, really. I mean, you've obviously got a few hundred coming down from Lancashire, and yeah, I guess the league has to have their say. I imagine the club don't just get to arbitrarily say, yeah, I mean, this plume of smoke's coming over the corner of the stadium, so this is a bit iffy, let's call it off now. They've probably got to liaise with 4 or 5 different interested parties in that respect. So the police, the fire brigade, EFL, as I say, council, maybe even. So yeah, I mean, these sort of things end in seas of bureaucracy, don't they? And box ticking exercises, when I think realistically by 2:30, 3 o'clock, we all knew quite literally which way the wind was blowing.
Yeah, you got to get the press release written as well, and get all the social media sorted. So it does kind of beg the question, Alfie, when might the game be played? Do they want it played as soon as they can fit it in? Is there a gap in the schedule? It's looking very tight all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very tight wherever it goes. I mean, luckily we've had the Leicester one rescheduled now for Tuesday the 23rd, so we know that it's going to fall into one of 2 slots, really. It's going to either be Tuesday 16th, Wednesday 17th of April, or Tuesday 30th of April, Wednesday 1st of May, which is just a few days before they go to Ellen Road for the final day of the season. I think it was Southampton's sort of preference to just schedule it in for next Tuesday, next Wednesday, get it done as quick as possible. But I think Preston go to Cardiff away on the weekend, and by the sounds of it, they don't really want the extra travel, which from their perspective is fair enough. So yeah, it looks like we have to wait until after the international break for that one.
And Glenn, looking at the positives, bit of extra time for Kyle Walker-Peters and Ryan Fraser. We might have a few back in by the time we get to replay it.
No, it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Yes, you'll get a couple of players who are out fitter, but having a big fixture pile up is never ideal. So you'll probably find that'll rebound against you, and someone will get injured as a result of playing 4 games in 11 days or whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it'd be good for Kyle Walker-Peters to get fit, because he would make a massive difference. And Ryan Fraser, I think, we're fairly well covered in that area. But obviously he's been very good this season, so it'd be good to have him available. But yeah, swings and roundabouts. I think the fixture pile up is going to be very, very difficult to negotiate at the end of the season. As the intensity of the games is going to go up, and the stakes are going to be that much higher, because we have, as well, I'm sure we're going to discuss later on when we talk about the running, we don't have much margin for error now, the way things are. So yeah, the fixture pile up, I think it was very sensible of the club to try and get it played next week, and it's slightly annoying that that hasn't come to pass.
Well, we did get a game on Saturday, and it was a belter. We survived a Sunderland fight back to keep alive the hopes of the top two finish, as slim as they might be. 4-2, the final score. Steve, it was a game where we really should have been out of sight by half-time. It was a strange one.
Yeah, I mean, 4-0 at half-time wouldn't have flattered us, I don't think. Such was the domination. I mean, Sunderland basically had one half chance. I mean, they hit the post, but it was you kind of say to people, oh, well, the opposition hit the post. You think it was a really good chance, but the guy's basically on the goal line. He's got practically zero chance of scoring from the angle where he's hit it from. So, yeah, we dominated from pretty much from start to finish in that first half. And, yeah, but for some slightly iffy finishing, David Brooks in particular had 3, I think, shots that were basically identical back passes to the keeper. Slightly frustrating. He wasn't quite at the races, I didn't think, in the game yesterday, really, unfortunately. But I mean, we all have our slight off days. But other than that, I thought that first half we were very good. Just the wayward finishing, really. Armstrong had a couple of other decent chances. That one where he blasted it over when it was still 1-0. Was probably the big one. I think we got really lucky with that penalty. In terms of it's a absolutely fair decision to give the penalty, but where Armstrong's actually scored the penalty, he's definitely kicked that twice.
You think so? You think because that was going to be that's worth checking.
And that's one.
Yeah,
I mean, that's why the Sunderland players were complaining. I mean, it was interesting that immediately there was only 1 or 2 players that even noticed it. And obviously, once a couple of them had said, then all of a sudden there was 6 or 7 surrounding the referee and linesman. And I thought, as soon as Stuart Atwell, who I thought had an absolute garbage game for the most part, as soon as he went over to speak to his linesman, I just assumed he was going to disallow it at that point, because you would have thought that they were having a chat about, okay, have you seen him kick it twice? And one of them is surely going to say, well, he's slipped over, so the chances are that he's kicked it from one foot into the other, which is why it's appeared not a clean strike, because it's kind of looped up a little bit over the keeper. So yeah, we got away with that one.
Are you saying he didn't mean that?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not quite a Thierry Henry and Robert Pires effort, is it? But it's
that's the first time he's been mentioned in the same bracket as those guys.
Well, yes. But no, I mean, as I say, first half was excellent, and yeah, it definitely should have been out of sight. I mean, seeing the quotes from Sunderland's caretaker manager after the game saying that for long spells they were the better side. I mean, no, quite frankly, I genuinely don't know what game he was watching. They had 15 minutes where they were the better side, where we basically just got really complacent. We made a double sub that we probably didn't need to make, which weakened us temporarily, and we then made a double substitution to rectify the error, and all of a sudden we were back in control again. And I mean, it's weird that even though we had that wobbly spell where nobody seemed to be able to play a 5-yard pass in a straight line, everything was either overhit or underhit. Everything was either 1 yard to the left or 1 yard to the right. Nothing was kind of in line with where anyone was intending to put the ball. And it just seemed as if everybody just had this momentary sort of panic. And that just gave Sunderland that little bit of belief, which, I mean, they'd not shown for the previous hour and a bit. So that was annoying. The way that we do seem to have it in us every game. It doesn't matter whether the opposition have been any good or not. We still have this tendency to invite teams back into games at the moment. So yeah, I mean, another 2 conceded against, quite frankly, rubbish opposition. They were terrible, and it was they were as good as they were against us up at their place. They were as bad this time. And on another day, much like last week, that's a 6-7 or 8-0 game. If we take our chances and don't make stupid mistakes at the back. But ultimately, if you make mistakes at the back, you do give the opposition that belief. So that's got to be the body of work for the next 3 weeks, surely. Making sure that we have a settled back 6, 7 maybe. And unfortunately, I think that's that settled lineup has got to not include our club captain.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
well, we'll get onto that for sure in just a moment. Alfie, what was your take on the first half? I mean, obviously, Stu Armstrong scoring the rebound. I think it was Jan Bednarek with the header, wasn't it? But and the penalty as well. Did you think we were lucky to get that one? Do you think the penalty should have been perhaps striked off? Do you think he hit it twice? You'd have seen some replays, I guess.
Yeah, I just said when Steve was talking, I saw Matt Latiz tweeting about that today and said that he could see it from his seat in the ground that it was hit twice. But I mean, I couldn't tell at the time. Obviously, you watch it back and it seems like that. But I didn't really care because the celebrations in front of the away end were great. I thought for obviously a Geordie lad who had a terrible time at Stadium of Light, captaining his side for the first time back in September. But I mean, Saints were excellent value for their lead. Like Steve already said, they could have easily been 4 goals up. They're brilliant again, but yeah, that double substitution did just seem to kill them for 10 minutes. And I suppose it's the two sides of the coin, because you can say that Russell Martin got that wrong, and he did. And it was way too. I felt it was early at the time, and it proved to be too early because I think Will Smallbone had a really good game, and bringing him off, they lost some in. But then he brought it back with the changes, obviously. So with James Bree coming on, they just made that back four look slightly more solid, even though James Bree didn't actually do anything on a personal level with the ball. It just looked like it was the right shape again. And obviously,
round pegs and round holes, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and obviously Joe Rothwell did what he did. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I know Russell Martin, obviously, he's admitted it now. He's in the build up to this game, he has admitted that he is playing Jack Stephens and making a slightly different shape of the team because he wants him in there for who he is and the character he is and the player he is as well. So he has got an interesting. I think he has got a settled back 6 at this point. It's going to be with Jack Stephens in it. Obviously, the only problem that brings is when Kyle's back, does Ryan Manning get dropped, who I thought had a good game? So yeah, interesting. I don't know what I'd do with it. Well, I think I do know what I'd do with the back 4, but I don't think it's the same thing Russell Martin would do.
Glenn, let's get your thoughts on the game first, because there was a lot that went on, wasn't there, with those substitutions and the sort of crazy 10 minutes where we found ourselves getting pegged back to 2-2, and then it all kind of comes good at the end. But it was the subs that really changed the upset of the tempo.
Oh yeah, they did. It was as comfortable as it could possibly be up until that point, and I agree totally with what Alfie said. It just seemed too early to be making that change. It's almost like a change off a spreadsheet. Oh, it's 60 minutes. We must make 2 substitutions and we must take Will Smallbone off. Because he was having an excellent game. And I thought, I mean, apart from his finishing, I thought David Brooks was half decent as well. And to change that right-hand side, because you shifted Adam Armstrong that side as well, and brought Joe Aribo on. Joe Aribo seemed to struggle to get to the pace of the game when he first came on. So there was a definite sort of disconnect happen when that substitution was made, which I agree with Alfie. I thought it was unnecessary. They scored 2 goals. The second goal's a brilliant goal. Obviously, the first goal, it's Sulemana kind of overplaying, getting tackled, and I don't think we closed the man down quick enough. I don't know who it was. But we kind of let him have a shot, and it flicked off of Jack Stephens, as I've just been told, and went in. So, but the 5 subs thing, it's interesting because we used it or Russell Martin used it on Saturday to kind of correct what was wrong with the first 2 subs. And when James Bree came on, as I tried to interrupt Alfie earlier on, suddenly we had round pegs in round holes all over the pitch. And Joe Rothwell, who I'm well known for not being a huge fan of, they played him in the right position. He's a number 10. He can't play number 6 because he can't tackle. He can't play number 8 because he's no good anywhere near his own goal, receiving the ball with his back to goal. He's a number 10. So it's him or Stuart Armstrong. And that was the substitution that was made. And Rothwell showed what he's good at, driving with the ball. He's got a good shot on him, obviously, as we've already seen. And he's obviously going to be a contributor from the edge of the opponent's box. And it's worked for him. That's 2 games it's worked for him, sort of like coming forward. But yeah, it's about balance, and the substitutions in general got to be about balance. We keep the balance in midfield with basically a 6, an 8, and a 10. We all know the players who can play those roles. We've struggled this season when we've tried to do something different. Mm-hmm. I've thought Russell Martin has been a bit where I disagree with what he does. Is that he seems to think some of our players are more flexible than they are. He thinks Will Smallbank can play as a 6. I don't really think he can. He thinks Rothwell can play as an 8. I don't really think he can. He's good at his one position, and that's it. And now we've got the balance issue in defence. And as soon as we sort it out with the second set of substitutions, we suddenly look a better side. I mean, Sunderland didn't manage the game terribly well because at 2-2, they really should be thinking, we've got out of jail here. We need to shut up shop now and try and, just try and keep what we've got here. But they seem to get a little bit carried away, and to get caught on the break like they did for two, both of Rothwell's goals basically was pretty poor from their point of view. And as Steve said, the manager saying they were the better side for the last periods of the game is the reason why he won't be a manager there for very long. Because I thought they were largely awful, but there you go. Don't care about them. Onwards, and hopefully some lessons have been learnt. And over the next 3 weeks, or whatever it is, before we've next got a game, everyone can reflect on that, and it'll be decent when we come back.
That is what worries me, though. 3 weeks to think about it and to come up with something does scare me a little bit.
Do you think it's too much time? Do you think he's going to be overthinking it? Because we had this with Ralph, didn't we? There was always after the international break, he'd overthink things, and then it'd be a disaster first game back. So do you think, Alfie, it might be a bit too long? Maybe they should just have a week off.
No, I think I am jesting. I think that ultimately they need to get some recovery in at the moment, and they need to sort out the defence. So if that time is used to do that, then happy days. I think it does come at a good time for them. If they're going to go and do 10 games in 36 days, then they're going to need to be fully recharged, and they will be. I don't know how many players it will be that go away with Scotland and Ireland and Poland and stuff like that. So, but there'll still be a decent chunk of the group there. But yeah, I mean, we may come back and it'll be a 4-2-2 diamond with Camaldine and Sekumara up front, and we'll be thinking, what the hell has gone on? But I don't think that'll be the case. I think the 11 right now is very clear. Because the front three of David Brooks, Che Adams, Adam Armstrong, for me, is the best front three at the club. I think it's pretty clear. Ryan Fraser's been a little bit unlucky because he sort of lost that crown whilst he hasn't been able to play. But he'll be a brilliant impact player, as we've already seen. And Glen's absolutely bang on with the midfield. I think there's 2 players for every position. It's very simple. If Flynn Downs can't play, Shea Charles can come in. If Will Smallman can't play, Joe Rebo can come in. So, yeah, for me, it's quite clear. It's just that defence.
What's the answer with Jack Stevens, Steve? If it was you, because the numbers, I think it's 18 goals conceded in the last 8 games. You kind of touched on it earlier. It's kind of we've got to go back to basics and get this sorted before this run in.
Yeah, I mean, while we do have the attacking talent to be able to do it, it kind of feels an unsustainable thing to basically need to score 3 goals a game to win it, to have a chance of winning it. So yeah, I mean, we've gone on a 25 game unbeaten run where basically Jack Stevens hasn't played a single game from the start. So why are we? I don't understand why he's felt the need to get Stevens back in the team. This isn't a sort of anti-Jack Stevens sort of rant or anything, but there's a partnership between Bednarek and Harwood-Bellis that has been harboured over a 25 game period. And with the fullbacks either side as well, with the understanding with Manning and with Carl Walker-Peters and with Flynn Downs in front, and the little triangles that those players play to get us out of the pressure situations. Now Stevens is good with the ball at his feet, I think, but it's also the problem is when you're shoehorning 3 of them in, they're all 3 of them are used to playing either left or right of centre. And all of a sudden, having 3 of them there, you've got 2 of them at some point are stepping on each other's toes. And that leaves a space somewhere else for the opposition to exploit.
Is it more than, Steve, a lack of leaders in the rest of the team? Because if he's in the team, because he's all right. We've never been critical of him when he's played, but the manager talks about the fact that he's that voice in the dressing room and that leader on the pitch. Is it more about the lack of leaders elsewhere, do you think?
Well, the one thing I would add on that is that the games they lost against Bristol City and Hull City, where I think are the only games in that 3 game period where Russell Martin feels they were outmanned and beaten by braver men. He didn't play a minute. The game against Millwall, they absolutely dominated and they should have got a result. He did play. But
those 2 games you're talking about, Alfie, he picked crap midfields in those games.
Well, exactly.
That was when he picked Rothwell and Smallbone to play as the 2 defensive midfielders, and then wonders why we let in loads of goals. So that stat that Martin read out at the start, it's a little bit of a misnomer because it's been a combination of picking the wrong midfield and messing around with the defense.
You then leave you leave the defence exposed, regardless of which members are in it. I mean, you take the top teams. I mean, you take Rodri out of that Man City team, and that Man City defence suddenly looks very vulnerable, and they've shown that quite a lot this season. And Liverpool a few years back, before basically Jurgen Klopp when he first came in, they basically and Brendan Rodgers before him, basically just seemed to think that the defensive midfield position was an optional extra. But it's such a vitally important position in any good successful team, because if your defence is underworked, it's because you've got a balanced and sort of protecting midfield in front of it. And obviously Downs has had his injury and illness issues this season, but we've had a replacement that can step in there in Shea Charles, and we've not really, I don't think we've quite managed him as well as we might have done at times.
The other thing I would say is, when was the last time we commented on a Taylor Howard-Bellis cross-ball switch? I think you lose a little bit of him when he plays out on the right. He doesn't have the sort of the freedom to move into the middle of the pitch and then dash one over.
But if he wants to play Stevens, he's got to nail his colours to the mast and drop one of the other two. Otherwise, you're shoving players out of position. So if you want to play him in his best position. Like I say, leave one of the other two out, make the decision, or come up with a permanent formation switch where we're playing three at the back, which I don't think would suit the current set of players we got, because that would impact sort of like the wide players we have. Suddenly there wouldn't be
surprised though they didn't just play him as a natural six in those games where he was putting Will Swalman into there. I'm surprised they didn't just put Jack Stevens in there, to be honest with you. I'm not saying it would have worked, but just thinking in his way.
I mean, he's ended up playing most of the last 2 or 3 games in that role anyway. When he brings the ball out, he doesn't tend to go back into the back four very often. But in terms of the leadership, I mean, I think if you look through that team, I think there's enough leaders in there. There's enough experience. Certainly, Bednarek is very vocal these days, which is something he's only developed over the last year or so.
Certainly more than before.
Howard-Bellis he's not afraid to have a moan at people. Manning's quite vocal, actually, surprisingly, which you probably wouldn't necessarily immediately think, given the bloody stick that he takes off of people. And you've got people like Stu Armstrong and Adam Armstrong and Shea Adams. They're all people who you can visually see from the stands. They're all kind of always involved in the chat. There's only a handful of players that you would think, I'm not sure he's going to be kind of sort of shouting from the rooftops or anything. Like Walker Peters is one of those sort of leaders by example type players, I think. And you probably then look at a lot of the lone players. Because they're coming in as a lone player, it's difficult to kind of demonstrate sort of outward leadership, I think, in a lot of senses. David Brooks seems quite a quiet lad, so isn't likely to be sort of bellowing at people. But I think professional players all bring various different leadership qualities, just in different ways, and you don't necessarily need a team full of sort of Tony Adams types. There's more than one way to skin a cat in terms of leadership and captaincy and that sort of thing.
We'll do Player of the Week in just a moment. If you're watching the live stream, and there are lots of you tonight, just let us know who your Player of the Week was, if you were at the game or if you saw it. Who was the standout performer for you? Glenn, I just want to get your thoughts on Sulemana before we finish. I feel like just like a goal and it will all click, because that was not a bad performance from him yesterday, and that was it half an hour that he was on the pitch. We were excited, we were up off our seats, but it's just not happening at the moment.
If I see him cut in from the left wing one more time and side foot it straight to the goalkeeper, I think I'm going to scream. He does my head in, because there's something there, obviously, until he gets to the actual business part of picking out a player or having a shot. I can't help but think that with the squad that we've got, bearing in mind we've got wide players like Fraser, Edozie, Brooks, Adam Armstrong, who all contribute goals and assists from those wide areas. Sulemana has only ever scored 2 goals for us, and that was when he played up the middle. So instead of chucking Sekou on for the last 15 minutes when Che Adams gets tired. Try Sulemana up the middle and just see how he gets on. He might not be brilliant with his back, all the back to goal stuff. He'll probably struggle with, but I would just like to see him tried there because I think he just struggles to create anything off that left hand side, despite the fact he had the fullback on toast. I mean, it's not his fault. We paid 23 million for him or whatever it was. That's not his fault. He's a young lad over from France. He's still only 21, is he?
22, yeah.
But 21, 22. But he's playing in the Championship now, so it's a massive drop in standard. He obviously did nothing last year. I was expecting a lot more this year from a player that we paid that much money for. So I would just like to see us try him in the centre forward position. Last 15 minutes of a game, cause absolute chaos. See how he gets on, because on the left wing we've got other options that we can use over there who we kind of know are going to be effective. Whereas with him, I still would be surprised if anything happens from at the end of one of his burns past the fullback. So yeah, I would like to see him tried as a centre forward, but whether we do or not, I don't know.
I do think, looking at his situation and given how it hasn't worked, and I may be wrong, but I just can't see a situation in which he's still here next season for whatever reason, whether that's in the Premier League or in the Championship. I just feel there's been such not a mismatch. I think that's unfair. He's had injuries and he hasn't really had a run of games. I mean, Ruben Sellers didn't play him, even though they lost every game 1-0. But I just think the way it hasn't worked, I just think that he'll go for 10 million or whatever it is the club can get for him next summer. But I guess we'll see.
And that'd be the last of the January transfer window signings gone, I think, won't it? So
well, if Charlie doesn't stay, yeah.
James Bree's still here.
Oh, true.
Oh, of course, yeah. Forgot James Breeze. So, right, let's do TSP Player of the Week then. Alfie, who was the standout performer for you? Obviously, in the stadium, it was Jan Bednarek again, which I'm sure is some sort of like in-joke in hospitality where they all vote for Bednarek. Not that he had a bad game, but I just thought there were others that deserved man of the match yesterday.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree on that. I mean, the obvious one, you've come to me first, so I have to give you the obvious one. That's just Joe Rothwell, because to make that kind of impact in 20 minutes, as well as the 2 goals, the way he brought the ball out from the back, he was taking players on, which, yes, all right, didn't work against Hull, but it worked yesterday. So, yeah, Joe Rothwell.
His finishing was something else as well, wasn't it?
He's got real technique on him, hasn't he? When he hits them, they fly. Yeah. They don't just, it's the opposite of Kamaldeen and Sulemana, actually. If we can just get the pair of them striking a ball together for 10 hours a day, you might learn something, because it's so true and it goes through all those bodies as well.
I thought the best bit about the second goal was not playing Che Adams in, who was in front of him. It's like, don't play him in, don't play him in. And it went to Armstrong and then came back and obviously we got the goal. Steve, Player of the Week for you?
It's quite a difficult one. I mean, everybody was good, but nobody stood out, I didn't think. I'll go Adam Armstrong. Largely because he's actually had a fairly quiet month before last week. But he seems to be kind of back in some sort of groove now. So that I think bodes well for the running.
You're nodding, Glenn. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree with that about Adam Armstrong. Certainly, he had 5 or 6 games where he didn't look on it, and I know Russell Martin said he shouldn't have dropped him. I think it was spot on to drop him for a game, give him a bit of a kick, and he's come back looking like a player who's got something to prove again, like he was at the start of the season. Because right at the start of the season, we were relying on his record in the Championship from 2 years ago, and he. He proved he could be useful in this division, and that's what he's doing. But I would say, we've already mentioned him, I thought Will Smallbone had an excellent game. I think it was a mistake to take him off.
His stock went up when he went off. I don't know if Alfie mentioned this in his piece, but when he went off, you sort of realised actually he was having a much better game because of the 10 minutes afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, at the time I was kind of shaking my head when they took him off, and Brooks. I just thought it was unnecessary. But that was balanced out by the fact that Aribo was coming on, and he's been decent this week, but it did decent in the last few weeks. It didn't quite work out on Saturday, but there you go. So I thought Smallbone had a good game, and again he's been playing well in that position, that balance thing again. When he's played in his correct position, he's been playing well since the start of January. Ever since Joe Aribo went off to the AFCON, he's been playing well as a number 8. Put him number 6 doesn't work. as we know. But play him in that position. He played well, and he had another good game on Saturday.
All the clues are there, aren't they? We'll get the poll on social media in just a moment. Saints now have, well, it's just short of 3 weeks off because of Leicester's progress in the FA Cup. Then, of course, there's the international break. We're next going to play on Good Friday at St Mary's. It's going to be Middlesbrough. Bit of extra time off. So let's just talk about the run-in in general and just preparations for that Middlesbrough game. Alfie, is there any word on what the club are planning? I assume they're not giving everybody a week off and heading off to Dubai for a couple of weeks of warm weather training. It's going to be...
Just me for that.
Everybody on the pitch at in Staplewood and working on some of the issues.
No, to be fair, I think they'll have a few days off next week, probably, I imagine, before everyone goes away for the internationals, just because it has been such a grueling running. And, you know, Russell Martin always sort of talks about how he doesn't get to see his kids and stuff like that. So I think he feels the pain of the players in that regard as well. So they'll have a few days. They've been trying to arrange a friendly match of some sort to go into next week as well. But I think Russell sort of told me that it's just been difficult because obviously everybody who is worth playing has games anyway, and it's such a busy time of year. So they'll have to replicate that in training, whether that means they'll do some under 21s and stuff. But yeah, it's going to be it's going to be a long time to work on a few things. And I mean, again, I don't know how many people will go away for the country, but you'd like to think they'll have enough time to club some stuff.
Glen, 10 games to go. I think 6 points adrift of second place. Leeds are obviously doing all right. You know, we've got the game in hand. We'll have another game in hand by the time we play again. What are your thoughts on the final run-in?
We've got a chance, obviously, if we win our games in hand, we're back in with a shout. But there is very little margin for error now. We kind of made a big dent in our own ambitions. With that little sort of like 3 or 4 game run where I think we lost 3 out of 4, didn't we? Won the West Brom game and lost the other 3. So that puts a bit of a dent in. Usually in the Championship you could get away with that, but not this year. As has been discussed many times, the pace of the top 4 has been ridiculous. So so there's got to be an element of hoping that the other teams have a blip as well. It seems to be the way that when you lose one, you lose another one. That seems to be the way it goes. So it'd be interesting to keep an eye on Ipswich over the next couple of weeks, because I mean, I think as we said, they got 1 win in 8 not so long ago. Then they won 6 in a row, and now they've just lost again. So hopefully they'll have a bit of a blip. We're waiting for Leeds to fall away. They've been absolutely relentless, bar one game that they drew. So if they keep that up from now to the end of the season, we'll have no chance of catching them. But we just have to hope that they do fall away a bit. Leicester are having problems at the moment, so it could all get very, very interesting. You could have 4 teams involved right to the end. Fixture pile up is against us, but we've got those 3 games. The 3 teams I mentioned, we got them all away from home. So lose a couple of those, and we'll be absolutely dead in the water. But if we could go to Ipswich and win, and then go to Leicester and win, then we're going to have every chance of being involved. But there are some, looking at the other games apart from those 3, I mean, just quickly, Borough, Blackburn, Coventry, Watford, Cardiff, Stoke, Preston. We're probably going to have to win all of those, if not 6 and draw the other ones, sort of thing. We can't afford any Millwall type slip ups where we play a team that's average and throw it away. So so very little margin for error. Looking forward to it. I've kind of accepted now that we're going to be in the playoffs, but no, it's a defence mechanism. I clearly do not want to be in the playoffs. I want Saints to get promoted along with Ipswich, and I want Leeds and Leicester to have a playoff to see who's got the most arrogant fan base, and both of them get beat by Hull. So that's what I'd love to happen, but unlikely. So we've got it all to do, but it's in our hands, obviously, and those 3 massive away games against the teams around us are going to make or break it.
Interesting results at the weekend too, Steve. Obviously, I think I got to the ground just in time to see Cardiff equalise, and then their winner was probably one of the biggest cheers of the afternoon in the concourse. So as Glenn says, the others, there is the opportunity that they might drop a point there or 2.
Yeah, I mean, that was an extraordinary collapse by Ipswich, and it never at any stage looked likely until the 89th minute, when I think Kieran McKenna got a little bit kind of overthought it and took Kiefer Moore off, who was basically the outlet for if they wanted to sit back defensively. Okay, fine, we just play the ball up to him and he'll hold it up, bring others into play, maybe win a few free kicks, run the clock down, everyone's happy. Took him off and brought on a sort of small diminutive attacking midfielder, and then didn't see the ball for the next 10 minutes, and the ball just kept coming into their penalty area. And it was weird that they get this corner in the 99th minute, I think it was, and that goal felt inevitable, despite the fact that Cardiff had basically offered nothing for like 89, 90 minutes. Having got the one back to equalise, Ipswich had no way of getting out. And I think McKenna I think you would imagine he'll look at that and probably hold his hands up and say, yeah, that's on me, lads.
But that gives us a bit of hope for the bank holiday Monday, doesn't it?
It does, certainly. And Ipswich themselves have been the masters of scoring the late goals. In fairness, all four of us up there have scored quite a lot in the last 10, 15 minutes of games. But Ipswich in particular have been scoring injury time goals. So for them to give up 2 in the way that they did should give us plenty of confidence, really, that they've got it in them to completely throw it away in any given game. So yeah, they'll be annoyed with that, having got themselves into such a strong position. And when you look at the situation now, back in September, October time, we were, I think, either 11 or 14 points behind Leicester. We win our game in hand. I know that game in hand is not going to be played for ages, but if we win that, then the gap is 6 points. We win at Leicester, the gap is 3. And all of a sudden, it's on, and you just never know. While Leeds look good at the moment, they're trampling on more or less everyone. There's still that's still a vulnerable team if you're willing and brave enough to attack it. We've seen that teams have attacked them and not taken their chances. Leicester being the prime example of that game a couple of weeks back, where they could have been 5-0 up in the last 15 minutes and not really worried about it, but didn't take their chances. And Leeds got the equaliser and then steamrolled them. Got the weight of the fan base at Elland Road behind them and got them over the line. But they've shown enough vulnerability, I think, in enough games this season that, and also it's a 46 game season. You can't be perfect from start to finish, as Leicester are ably demonstrating now with their hopefully Devon Lock-esque stumble. There's one for the dads and granddads.
Look it up, kids.
Yeah.
Alfie, we talk about the fixture pile up at the end of the season, but I guess the flip side of that is if you're playing well, the team is picking itself, you've got the momentum, you want the games to come thick and fast. So could it work in our favour, maybe?
Well, when you ask the players, do you want to be Saturday, Wednesday, they all say yes. They don't like training. Obviously, nobody likes training. So from that perspective, it's for them to put the money where their mouth is, right? If you want to play it week in, week out, then do it. I don't think it's a massive positive. If I could choose to not have 10 games in 36 days and have maybe an extra 6 or 7, I would, to be honest. I think, as Glen alluded to it earlier, you've got people like Flynn Downs who are just so integral to the team. If you lose him for 2 weeks, that's 4 games. And things look really different. So I'm not buzzing about the idea of playing 10 games in that time, but the players say they want to, so let's see what they can do.
It's a very long way away, but we need to do some score predictions for the Middlesbrough game, which is going to be on Good Friday. It seems crazy doing this far in advance. Steve, am I right in saying that you called 4 goals at the weekend?
I did.
We all laughed at you.
Everyone laughed, and look.
See, with a bit more thought, if you'd have thought, actually, we'll probably let in 2 as well. You'd have nailed that. So I'm going to give you the honour of going first for the Middlesbrough game. If you want to pick something out of your hat.
Middlesbrough kind of feel like they're in a not too dissimilar position to Sunderland now, in that kind of any ambitions of getting in the playoffs are probably gone. Unless they put a promotion worthy run together for the last 10 games or so, they're not going to be in the shake-up of it. So I do wonder whether kind of inherently the manager's then looking at trying out different things, seeing who he wants to keep on for next season, and then you maybe get a little bit of a disjointed performance. I mean, many of their fans would probably argue they've been putting in disjointed performances for months, so it's one of those. But I think ultimately, with a 3-week break behind us, I mean, obviously some of the players are going to play internationally, but I think from a domestic perspective, a 3-week break helps us pretty nicely. I think in going into that first sort of 2 or 3 games. Certainly the Easter weekend where we've got the game Good Friday and Easter Monday. I think that freshness is going to help us a lot. Hopefully gives us an advantage over the sides we play. So, I mean, I think you've got to be looking at winning out at home. Every game has got to be a win, and actually our goal difference could do with a little bit of a boost. Hopefully the time spent sorting out the defence, maybe it's a case of sorting out defensive selection as opposed to anything system related. And if we turn up at St Mary's on Good Friday and the team is kind of what I think we all would like to see it, then 3-0 home win, I think.
Oh, nice.
I thought we was going to go with 4 goals again then. Glenn, do you want to go next?
Middlesbrough are kind of they're a team that kind of go under the radar for me. I don't really know much about them. I obviously know Michael Carrick is their manager.
Yep.
And it seems like a team in his image, really. Not terribly exciting, and they're going to be mid-table, as Steve said. They're not going to trouble the playoffs. They're not going to be anywhere near getting relegated. So hopefully they're. It might be a bit soon to have be on the beach and have your eye on the summer sort of thing, but it certainly should be a team that like Sunderland, we lost to them earlier in the season, and that was an abysmal performance. Another Mason Holgate inspired absolute dirge like the Sunderland 5-0 was. So hopefully we'll correct that one as well. Now we've got rid of him, and now we're a much better side. So. I thought at the start of the season, after they beat us, I think, which was their first win, Middlesbrough went on a little run where they won sort of 6 out of 7 or something like that, and they looked like the sort of team that were going to, challenge the playoff places.
Well, they beat Leicester home and away.
Yeah, they've kind of sunk back.
No mugs.
That's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, but they've kind of sunk back into the pack now. So though they've won the last couple, so I'm and Borough Breakdown beat us at the podcast awards as well. So we have them. They have Johnny Howson in midfield, who's knocking on a bit now. I've always quite liked as a player. So, but hopefully he doesn't have a good game. So with all that, and especially the Borough Breakdown thing, we need to get some revenge. So I'll go for a 3-1 win.
3-1 win. Alfie, we're going to avenge the defeat.
I hope so. I've looked at the 3 results from following international break this season already, and there's a 4-1 defeat, a 2-1 win, a 1-1 draw. So not really much to go off there. I was going to go 3-1 like Glenn, but I will go a bit different this time because copying Glenn doesn't usually work for me. So I'll go for a 4-1 win.
4-1 win. Okay. If you're watching live, by the way, put your predictions in the comments, and we'll share that on the socials as well. Now, on Monday, we got to see Saints' financial accounts for the year end up to June 2023, and they showed a pre-tax loss of £87 million. There are a couple of interesting takeouts from this. Steve, I mean, a pre-tax loss of 87 million quid on the face of it isn't good, and the more you sort of delve in, it didn't look any better either. There's a few shocking numbers in there.
Yeah, I mean, the one I think that stood out to me was the more than £14 million in manager payoffs for obviously Ralph Hasenhüttl and Nathan Jones over the course of last season, and Ruben Sellers, of course. Although I'm not sure how much of a payoff he'd have got given he was at the end of his contract. But yeah, I mean, obviously that's a cost that we're not going to have this season. But the transfers that we made last season are going to be on the books for a while, because unless we're able to sell some of these players on quickly. And it may be that Charlie Alcaraz is the the financial fair play saviour in the summer in terms of turning his book value into a sizable profit. But I don't know. It's one of those you've kind of got to play it by ear and kind of hope that. I mean, I think we take the ownership at face value. We take them at their word until they demonstrate otherwise, that they're in it for the long haul, and that any incurred losses are going to be covered. I mean, they've put some money in this season. I think in July they put in, I think it was around 15 million in equity. So that basically goes straight into the bank account and can be used to offset some of the losses. So, I mean, how this season's finances look. I mean, they're obviously not going to be as bad because we've cut a lot of costs, made a lot of sales, and those sales go directly onto the profit and loss. So there's obviously a positive there, but obviously no massive TV income. I think parachute payments 60% of last year. So you're probably losing 40 to 50 million there. Gate receipts will be down because even though attendances have held up, in fact, attendances might even be up on last season.
Yeah,
we had a lot of low attendances at the back end of last season, but nobody's paying 50, 60 quid for championship games. The club have priced tickets quite fairly from what I've seen on a match by match basis.
I imagine hospitality's taken a hit as well.
Yeah. I mean, you're not able to sell, probably unable to sell a box for 400 quid a head for a midweek championship game against Preston North End.
The other thing is they made a sizable payment towards that MSD Holdings loan this season as well, which will be reflected in next year's accounts. So that will be a sizable amount off.
I mean, Alfie, you've spent more time looking at this than any of us, I guess. What were the standouts for you? Should we be worried? That was the first thought for most fans. You see that and you think, oh gosh, okay, this is not good.
Well, I think obviously then days later you see that Leicester have been charged for a profit and sustainability breach in their Premier League season last season. So the clubs that go through this are at risk of that. But I think the club have managed it pretty well. They in terms of squad turnover, Steve has already mentioned it. They sold a lot of players like Tino Livramento, James Ward-Prowse, Romeo Lavia, which they got 53 million for. Romeo Lavia, which is brilliant negotiations because he hasn't played a game this season
for 20 minutes of first team football.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they will offset it slightly. I'm still expecting there to be a loss next season, obviously, just because of the drop in everything. But like Steve said, I think they've managed it deliberately this season as to not break those rules. That's why they've invested only pretty much in loans. David Brooks, Ryan Fraser, these guys have come in. Even Taylor Howard-Bellis only comes in for £20 million if they go up and all of a sudden the financial problems are slightly better. So I don't think it's a case of being worried about it, but I think we're probably going to have to be a little bit cautious that if they don't go up this season, you'd have to expect there'll be some cuts to the playing staff, and we don't want to see that. But so we'll guess we'll have to see what goes on the next 6 weeks.
Even more pressure on that running. I mean, Glenn, the thing that stood out for me, not just the changing of the managers, but you also look at what we spent on new players. I think it was over 100 million quid. And you've got Suleiman, who we've already talked about tonight. Then you've got Lavia, Onanachu, Alcaraz, Sekou Mara as well. I mean, I could go on, but it just kind of brings home how disastrous that January transfer window was and the money.
Yeah, I mean, it shows you that clubs like us can't afford to make too many high value mistakes. We went through this as well in about 2017. The Guido Carrillo, Wesley Hoyt, Mario Lamina all came in for about 20 million each, all on 4-year contracts. And that is obviously going to, you decide they're all crap after 6 months, but you've got that problem for 4 years unless you can get rid of them permanently. And we couldn't, we had to punt the Hoyt and Lamina went out on loan. So, obviously we got some loan fees, but there was still that problem that you've got those massive transfer fees in the column that's you don't want it in. And if the players turn out to be not very good, you pay for it for a long time. And that's kind of where we are. I mean, that list of players that you've mentioned there, yes, we've managed to sell Romeo Lavia, but they haven't exactly contributed vast amounts to to what's gone on the pitch. So you've got to get things right, and it's all a bit of a vicious circle. If you're changing manager 3 times like we did last season, you're buying players I mean, Paul Onuachu is the classic one. We buy him for Nathan Jones' style of football, and then sell him, and then sack Nathan Jones 2 weeks later. And Paul Onuachu's only played about 2 games, and I still feel sorry for the guy. I genuinely do, because he gave up on his winning the championship in Belgium to come and play for us, and the rug was pulled from underneath him, basically. Whether he would have been any good or not is another conversation altogether. But
I mean, even Dragon Solak has said that to me in person. He's literally said that was a huge mistake. Obviously, it doesn't take a genius to work that out, but but to bring all those players in to play a certain way and then sack the manager 2 weeks later, probably because he got himself sacked really in the press. I just thought it was a mental decision.
But so many. We're not the first, and we won't be the last team to do that. And
as you say, it's not even the first time we've done it.
No, and if you flip, if you appoint a manager who's the polar opposite of what went before,
that's the risk, isn't it?
That's what you're going to end up with, and that's why with Jason Wilcox there now, you've got to think if Russell Martin doesn't work out at some point, they're going to replace him with a manager who wants to play the same way, who can work with those same players, But yeah, there you go. There are some horrible mistakes, and that's added up to relegation, and that's why we're a bit worried about the financials now.
I think I read that the loss was worse than the COVID season. I think if it was 87 million last year, it was 76 million was the deficit during the COVID season. So
we finished 11th in the COVID season, didn't we? So you get the prize money for the positions. I think that'll account for about 20 million quid. I think difference.
Yeah, that's one of the differences in the report this year, because obviously going from, I think it was 15th the season before to 20th, I think I don't know what it does say in the report, but it equates to about £12 million or something like that as well.
And just the one manager, of course, during that season. Alfie, if you want some bedtime reading, it's all online. You've kind of summed it up. I mean, you've written a piece about it, I guess, this week. I think I saw.
Yeah, it was. Do you know what? It was actually my day off, and then I got out of bed about 8:45 in the morning and saw that all hell was breaking loose online, and had to spend the next 3 hours of my life working. But on the Daily Liquor website, if you, for any reason, do want to read that, I can't imagine you would. It is on there. You can find it. Just type in Daily Echo Southampton Finances 2023.
You say that, but the live stream numbers, as I look at you now, have never been as high as they are right now. So I'm thinking maybe we do finances every week.
Do some numbers next week.
Maybe we do like a little spin-off pod where we just talk about finances.
Raw sex appeal. That's what it is.
And Leeds fans, high Leeds fans.
Oh yeah, high Leeds fans.
That's probably that. Yeah, it is probably that. That's pretty much it for this week's episode. Don't forget you can follow Total Saints Podcast on all the social media platforms. It's at Total Saints Pod. It's great to hear from you throughout the week, and we've got a bit of time on our hands over the next couple of weeks. So do drop us a DM or get in touch on the socials, maybe an email via the website if you've got something that you'd like to share. And don't forget to check out that new merch store as well. It's shop.totalsaints.co.uk. We're also on Patreon. That's where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. You visit patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast to find out more. And there are 4 tiers ranging from £5 to £20 per month. Each of the tiers comes with some different perks, including some shout outs for the patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tiers. So thanks to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Saints in Exile, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer, James Kibbe, and Mike E, who are in the Francis Benali tier. And also thanks to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horstrup, Matt Hall, and Mark Littlewood, who are in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Alfie. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will see you after the break. We're going to be back on Easter Sunday, and that'll be at 7:15 for the live stream. So we'll see you then.